Hello, thanks for tuning in to this week's edition of Middle East Matters. I'm Rochelle Ferguson-Bouyahi. Coming up on this week's show. Grappling with turmoil, Lebanon's banks and schools close once again as the country struggles with its worst economic crisis in decades. Amid ongoing clashes along the Turkey-Syria border, Ankara moves forward with its promise to send captured jihadists back to Europe. Also coming up, the expiration of a decades-old land deal along the Jordan-Israel border sparks tensions between the neighbouring countries. But first, in Iraq, amid weeks of anti-government rallies, the country's ruling parties appear to have agreed on how to quell protests and put forward a raft of political reforms. Well, those proposed reforms might mean keeping Iraq's ruling elite in place, a move that could further anger protesters. Demonstrations which have proved deadly pose the biggest challenge to the country's political order yet since the 2003 US invasion. Well, the current Prime Minister, Abdul Mahdi, has called for protests to stop, saying they are hurting the economy. Next, Lebanon's banks and schools were once again closed on Tuesday as protesters resumed anti-government rallies blocking roads and government buildings. Now, recent demonstrations have been fuelled by anger at perceived high-level corruption as the country grapples with a deepening economic crisis. Well, bank branches were already shut for nearly half of October. Meanwhile, President Michel Aoun has promised talks to nominate a new Prime Minister and Cabinet to enact emergency economic measures. Well, to talk to us more about Lebanon's economic crisis, Hassan Obeid is a professor and researcher in finance at the European Business School of Paris. Welcome to you, Mr. Obeid. First of all, this is the worst crisis that Lebanon has seen since the civil war. How did Lebanon end up here?
Well, you know that since the end of the civil war in Lebanon, we get only about $3 billion as a debt. Now we have around $87 billion. So since $87 billion, we have about the third of the debt is coming from the management of the electricity and the oil and the oil activity and electricity activity. For sure, there is also some corruption in the government and the management of the country. So this is a problem. The problem is from here. So how to solve it now? The question is how to solve this problem. So we need to stop the corruption and to make a good management of the country, for sure.
Good management of the country, absolutely. Now, the central bank has come out and sought to reassure Lebanese people, saying, look, things are going to be okay. Just talk to us, if you will, about how Lebanese people are being affected on a daily basis by this economic crisis.
Well, Riyad Salem, he said that he is going to do the necessary to save the deposit of the depositors. So, and I think that he is going to put money in the market to save the depositors. By the way, he has no choice. And I'm sure that there's money in the Bank of Lebanon, in the reserve of the Bank of Lebanon. It's around $37 billion. And I can say that no panic.
What about this fixed exchange rate? I mean, is it sustainable at this stage?
You know, the Lebanese economy is related to the dollar. And now we know that there is a problem in this situation because there is a lot of demand on the dollar in the market, and we have some export of the dollar from the Lebanon to the outside. Now we know that we need to make some regulation, not necessarily a law for the capital control, not exactly a law of capital control, but just to ask the people to don't take all of the money. We have to make some trust in the bank system, in the banking system, and to then take all of the money now.
Mm-hmm. So regaining that trust is key, you say. Just a final question for you. Is the country likely to default in the short term?
I don't think so, because the default will follow the following of the default. That means some problem for the banking system, because the debtors of the Lebanese country are the commercial bank and the BDL, Bank of Lebanon. So the default, that means the country is not more able to pay the debt. And I don't think so. And you know that France is going to help to solve the problem in Lebanon now.
OK, Hassan Obeid, you're finance professor and researcher at the European Business School of Paris. Thanks so much for your time today.
Thank you very much.
Next to northern Syria, where clashes continue between Turkey-backed Syrian militia and Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces outside the town of Tamir. Now, the fighting comes despite a supposed ceasefire, which both sides say the other isn't respecting. Turkey, meanwhile, saying not all Kurdish fighters have withdrawn from the 30-kilometre deep security zone along the Turkey-Syrian border, as stipulated by the ceasefire agreement. Ankara, meanwhile, has announced it will be repatriating 11 French jihadists incarcerated in Turkey in the coming days. A German, an American and a Dane have already been sent back to their respective countries. The Netherlands, though, has vowed to appeal a court ruling ordering it to repatriate the children of mothers who joined the Islamic State. Delana de Souza reports on those who will be returning to France.
A Danish jihadist boarding a plane bound for Copenhagen in Istanbul. He's one of 22 Islamic State group fighters sent back to their home countries from Turkey. In the next few days, France will be receiving 11 of its citizens. They include 8 women and their children, as well as 3 men between the ages of 20 to 35. The women include Amandine Leclos, filmed at the Roj camp in northern Syria at the end of last year. Originally from the northwest of France, she was married twice to jihadists and at the time of filming refused to have her child sent back alone.
No, I can't do that. No, he's with me. If he leaves, I'll leave with him.
While Amandine's son will be taken into the custody of social services, she is said to be imprisoned upon her arrival in France. The first wave of repatriations is likely to trigger others, like these 3 women recently encountered on Syrian territory under the jurisdiction of the Turkish army. They all want to be tried in France.
Yes, I want to go back to France. I've been trying to return for 5 years now.
Paris remains worried about dozens of jihadists locked up in Kurdish-run prisons and camps in Syria. They include a theologist, a propagandist, and a recruiter for the Islamic State group. All are considered extremely radicalized by France. Paris has always insisted that French jihadists who joined the Islamic State group should face justice in Iraq and Syria, where their crimes were committed. What remains unclear is if Turkey plans on repatriating citizens who've been stripped of their nationality. Since 2017, 100 British jihadists have lost their nationality, including teen bride Shamima Begum. She has now been rendered stateless after Bangladesh refused to grant her citizenship. France gave up the idea of stripping dual nationals who join jihadist groups of their nationality. However, people who've acquired French citizenship can lose it once convicted of terrorism.
And finally for you, amid ongoing tensions between Israel and Gaza, the expiration of a deal allowing Israeli farmers to cultivate land in neighbouring Jordan has sparked controversy. As part of a 1994 peace treaty, Israeli farmers worked 2 parcels of land along the border, recognised as Jordanian territory. Jordan has praised the end of the deal, while Israel has called it a betrayal. Haxi Myers-Belkin reports.
Closing the door on a 25-year-old agreement. In the northern town known as Naharaim in Hebrew and Bakura in Arabic, Israeli farmers have long had the right to tend to their crops on sovereign Jordanian land, but no longer. 74-year-old Eli Arazi's kibbutz has grown bananas and avocados here for 70 years. He says he feels betrayed.
We're talking about 80 hectares of land, which represents a significant chunk of our income. This land is privately owned, and we have property rights. We're taking this like a punch in the face.
As part of the 1994 peace treaty between Israel and Jordan, an agreement was reached whereby 2 parcels of land along the border were declared Jordanian territory, while Israelis already living there were able to retain private land ownership. The deal stipulated that the lease would be extended automatically unless one party chose to opt out.
The annexing of Ghuma and Bakura, established in the peace treaty, is now over. I impose our full sovereignty on every inch of both of them.
The announcement was met with a round of applause in the Jordanian parliament, but with dismay across much of Israel. Israel's agriculture minister lamenting a new low point in Israel-Jordan relations.
This is, to some extent, a violation of the agreements established in 1994, even if they were made verbally, an understanding that we would continue to be able to farm in those areas. It posed no threat to Jordanian sovereignty. The Jordanians have taken this a step too far.
Jordan is just one of 2 Arab countries, along with Egypt, to have signed a peace treaty with Israel. Many Jordanians, however, saw the land deal that came out of it as a humiliation. In ending it, the king has angered a neighbour, but appeased his people.
Well, that brings us to the end of this week's edition of Middle East Matters. Join us next week at the same time for more.
Join us on France 24 for an exclusive series of reports from Libya. We'll take you to the battlefront lines and to the heart of the migration crisis, which is continuing on its coasts.
Don't miss this series of exclusive reports on France 24 and France24.com.